Hello, hello, hello. Hello, happy Wednesday, everybody, you beloved stars. This is Courtney with Stars of the Morning Light. I apologize, I am working with my lights in a very interesting room. So, I'm Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light. This is a live stream. I do try to say hello to those who come into the chat. Happy Wednesday, everybody. If some of you have heard, yes, we are having stuff happen within my household right now, and my office is full of a lot of clutter, and the dill that is normally hanging in my kitchen is now in here. There's a lot happening here at the McMahon house. So, with that being said, my schedule is a little chaotic, and so is organizing tonight. I did not realize I had skipped forward a bunch of chapters when I started preparing. I will go back to those, folks. We are in the 1969 copy of Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation. This is legitimately the 1969 copy. I see that Seeker of Truth came in. Good to see you, my dear. Oh, that's a little better. I accidentally skipped chapters 13. Then I think I purposely skipped chapter 14. Then accidentally skipped 15 and went straight to 16. I have no idea, everybody. I have a lot going on. I have a lot going on. With that being said, I plan to release on July 4th, that Friday morning at 11 a.m. I am going to release the tarot readings for all the zodiac signs that I had promised everybody for now through basically the end of the year. Not so much December, pretty much July, August, September, October, November, right? I will be releasing that on the 4th of July at 11 a.m. Also, I'm going to be starting a new series because last Thursday I did hanging out with Courtney, just hanging out, asking me questions. I'm going to start doing that more so, especially in the summer, especially when my schedule keeps shifting on me. I will be doing shows like that. If you haven't catched it, it's there. Subscribe, enjoy, give me that thumbs up. So, like I said, I had prepared actually chapter 16 when we were technically on chapter 13. I will go back to those. Chapter 16 in this, because I started this series, so you know, and there's a huge playlist. This is number 65 of the Edgar Cayce playlist. We are either ever in his biography, which we will be getting back to, or one of his source materials, like Edgar Cayce on Reincarnation. After we get through this book, we're going to be going into his readings about pretty much future happenings. We'll be bouncing around different source materials because it is the future. Edgar was 100 years ago. So chapter 16 is about group karma. I released a video probably 2 weeks ago now about soulmates and soul groups. You reincarnate within the same group often, right? Same location, probably the same race, color, creed, what have you. You keep reincarnating with the same group, oftentimes. So, chapter 16 is group karma. And it is many pages, I do have to say, because we've talked about this before. It's many pages of a case study. So, in one of Edgar's past lives, I'm talking about Cayce right now. So, because I'm going to paraphrase this. In one of Edgar's past lives, he was kind of a gambler, kind of a drinker, a little bit of a swindler. He lived in Fort Dearborn, which was outside Chicago. If you guys have never been to Chicago, Illinois, I'm from that area. Dearborn is still a very big name. We have towns named Dearborn. We have big major roads named Dearborn. So Dearborn is a big name in the Chicagoland area because it was a big fort, but it was like a gambling fort. I mean, think way, 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 way back when. It was actually it was a stronghold um, against native attacks, but they also traded a lot with the natives. Same with the city that I'm from. That city traded a lot. It was another um, fort right on, you got to think of Lake Michigan, right? Think Lake Michigan. There's many of forts as you're going up the lake. Um, so Lake Dearborn, he was alive. He was there. He was a gambler, a swindler, a drinker. And his lady, his wife at that time, Edgar ended up meeting her later in life. We have talked about this, I believe, in his biography at one point. He met her later in life. Well, he, of course, like he kind of recognized her immediately, and not because of this body of form, because of energy. We're all energy. So we recognize each other when it's like, oh, that's my soul group right there. Got it. And he started doing readings for her. Her name at the time was Fran. Oh my goodness. So this case study is actually one of the most in-depth case studies, as in how people just kind of keep recycling in with each other. And it goes on for pages, giving examples as to who was it then, who are they now, who's this, who's that. Like her husband of today was the barkeeper of the establishment she worked at when she was in Dearborn, married to Edgar in his past life, right? Um, her brother, it was interesting, like her brother um did something really bad in that life and also towards the church. And so in his later life, he married who was the priest of that time. He married her daughter in the later life, the recycled life, and they had a kid who was actually the priest that he kind of screwed over, who I guess that kid gave him a whole hell of a mess as a young child. There were just countless, nonstop, like I said, pages of examples. Now, we all do this. We all do this. So I want to explain this again a bit more. Instead of reading all the different examples, because we're intelligent, wonderful beings here that we roughly know things like this. This book was written in 1969. Now we have all this information available everywhere. But I really do want to hone in how people are, they reincarnate in groups. And so whenever I do an Akashic reading for somebody and we're going into their past lives, they find it fascinating because I'll say something like, "Oh, I thought you lived in Alabama," meaning like currently. "I thought you lived in Alabama." "No, I don't live in Alabama. I live in North Carolina." I went, "Real?" And I would say, "Really? Hmm. Okay, I must have had that wrong. Let's start your reading." And come to find out, it's because their soul group kept reincarnating in Alabama over and over again. And when we talked about their past life, they would go, "It's so interesting you're saying all this because I've been thinking about moving there." And I'm like, "Hey, if you want to move there, that's what your soul probably would like you to do to finish out whatever it needs to finish out." Edgar Cayce referred to karma as like retracing our steps, right? Putting right what once went wrong. And it could be so simple as just choosing not to. Just don't do what you did before. I'm going to take Edgar in this case. So, in that life in Fort Dearborn, outside of Chicago, like I said, drinker, gambler, he did one really good deed in that life. One really good deed. He kind of saved a small family unit from a native raid, and he was able to get them down the river. And this is the Mississippi River. So he's on the other side of Illinois, the Mississippi River, and they were safe and sound, right? He was traveling, saw some stuff happen. He was able to get him downriver. He did one good, really good deed. Good. Wonderful, right? But he still had to kind of fix the whole I'm a drinker, I'm a gambler, I'm a womanizer. Well, if we remember from his biography, which it is in the playlist, he had in his Edgar Cayce life, he had that 1 year that he left home and was like, I'm going to be a man. And in Edgar's eyes, he thought that was being a man. I'm going to gamble. I'm going to drink. I'm going to womanize. He couldn't do it. It was just not in his character of the life of the sleeping prophet. It was definitely not in his character. He only did it for 1 year and he got shot at and all sorts of things, right? Like it did not work out for him. And by the time he got back home, it was good because he then ended up living with his grandmother and she was dying and it was just him and her in the house. It was beautiful. He was there for her. What I'm trying to say though, that 1 year of retracing his steps of who he was a life ago in Dearborn, Illinois, Fort Dearborn, where that, right? Retracing his steps. It only took 1 year for him to go, I'm not going to do this. I'm going to shut this down. I'm going to remove it, and I'm not going to live that life. It took only 1 year to his soul to go, nope, not doing this. Oftentimes, when Cayce will talk and in his readings from the Akashic that he aware of it, not aware of it, it will usually always say our freedom of choice is far greater than any karma. And that's why I talk the way I do. Because you could be going down the wrong path, and it really is you're retracing your steps. And it could be very influenced by that group karma of your family that you've been doing this for a long time. It could be very influenced by that. And so you really might not feel and understand that you don't want to do this because everybody around you is doing it. Like everybody in everybody in Dearborn in Fort Dearborn were doing that. But you can always change it. You can always say, "Nope, I don't think I want to live that way. I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to live differently." And that decision, and then that follow through within that decision breaks that karma. You're done. You don't have to retrace those steps. You did it. You did exactly what you were supposed to do. That is why I also say that everything in third dimensional living consciousness is designed for you to choose yourself. So, regardless of what that family group that you've been reincarnating with over and over and over again, that is family, that is friends, that is tribes, that is all these people, right? That you've been reincarnating with over and over again, just because they're doing it doesn't mean that you have to. Everything in third dimensional conscious living is there for you to choose yourself and say, wait a minute, I've done this before. I don't need to do this. I can do something different. Cayce is actually a demonstration of that. It took 1 year for him to go, no, I'm good. I don't want to do any of that. And I see that earth elements came in. Good to see you, my dear. So, how do you all feel about that? Take a moment for yourself to just pause for a minute and think about that. Think about the people that you're with. Your partner, your children, your parents, your siblings, best buds, um, location. You choose to be born into that location because it's the web of that group, how it all spreads out, and they have to kind of be born into that location so they can still be connected, right? I talked about this in the soulmate soul group video before, but I didn't talk about the aspect of group karma. And we're going to talk about it in a much broader scope in a moment, as in like society. So, social karma, right? So, think of that though in your personal life. I mean, we already know as adults that we are influenced by our upbringing, by the people around us, by the nuns in the schools, by the grandparents who were harsh, by the friends that we've lost, all of that stuff, right? We are influenced by these things. And sometimes we might not be making the best decisions because they're based on these influences. And Edgar also had ratings that talked about outside influences, grander than us, or at least outside of our sphere of understanding, right? There's always so many influences. But we have this most amazing gift of human free will choice. That's yours. That's yours to demonstrate and use. But how does this play out in like big social stuff? I will tell you that chapter 16 was just that group karma, and it was the complete, like, I don't want to say complete case grouping or case file, but it was listing this person was so and so, then this person was so and so, and this person was so and so. I don't necessarily want to read it out loud because how it is written, and it's written fine if you're reading it privately to yourself. Verbally, as all of you are listening, it'd be kind of difficult to track who is who and what's what and where's what. So I also want to put out there, I still, to this day, I want to do case studies of exactly this. I would love to be able to do case studies to prove this as this case study has. But I would love to have multiple groups. I would love to have at least 6 groups, and I need many members of that particular group, and that is not easy to get. I mean, some of you listening would say, "Yes, I'll get a free reading," because it would be a free reading, by the way, that you would learn about some of your past lives. You know, I would get a free reading, but that does not mean a lot of your offshoots in your soul group would agree to it. And that's the problem I'm having in being able to get this because everything's based on permission, right? So even though I'm going to pick on Shelly here for a moment, Shelly and Neil, I could probably do one for Shelly and her husband Neil. Awesome. And I could probably do one then for one of Shelly's kids. Awesome. That's not enough. I need parents, siblings, cousins, best friends. I need a lot of people to be able to do an appropriate case study and publish something on it to help people really understand how it works. And so I have been putting that out there for, I think, well over a year now, periodically. If you think you can get that many people, mm, I would love to have at least 9 for each case, for each group, at least 9. That's what I would like. It's hard to get. Oh, goodness. Then chapter 17, it's, the present day attitude towards reincarnation. But this book was also written in 1969. So, so, that's not so much present anymore. He goes into the social stuff. He goes definitely into the church, the influence of the church. But I do want to read the very end of that chapter. And I want to remind everybody right now that I accidentally skipped some chapters that I will go back to. Right now, we're kind of paraphrasing some of the end ones, because one of the ones that I accidentally skipped was the law of grace. We're going to be covering that in depth. And do know, folks, your soul group, well, as we know as in soulmates, they are here to help you identify loving and choosing yourself. And for them, the same. You are the same for them. And when I say loving and choosing yourself, this does not mean in some weird, grandiose, or selfish, or look at me Instagram way. This is a I'm going to live my authentic truth. I'm going to live my authentic self. I'm going to think about myself and care for myself, give myself compassion so I can give it to others. So when you start doing that for yourself in your own life, other members of your soul group will start noticing. We're all mirrors of one another, and we learn so much through witnessing, and then we believe it can be done when change happens because we see it and we witness it. So then we get enough courage and strength to do it for ourselves. That is what should be happening within the soul groups. And I say should very lovingly because it starts with you. Oh, thank you for coming in, Chloe, and have a great time with your sister. Definitely. Oh, and Jackie J came in. Good to see you, my dear. So, in the concept of soul group, do know it's also groups of people. Groups of people. And I think in that soulmate soul group video that I put out there, I did talk about human persecutions. I will tell you, everyone living at some point in time was under some form of scrutiny and persecution to some degree or another. Everyone was. Every human was. There's no, even if you were the king most high, right? Even if you were that in a past life, which is, can happen, but it's more rare. Even if you were, because there weren't that many kings, right? Even if you were, that does not mean that every life after that was a glorious, great life. This is not the case. Every single human has. When we are talking about groups, though, well, then you need to talk about then races or locations, right? And I I think I put this out there numerous times. I have, because this writer is going to start talking about things, and it's very interesting. Um, because it was written in 1969, and so the wordage is of 1969. And it's interesting because in college, because I did get a minor in African American cultural studies, and it was very much, um, I guess, repeatedly told to us that, like, let's say you're talking about slavery. We should not, I should say, we should not, as any of us humans, talk about just slavery as this overall theme, this overall thing that happened. It really does come down to location and crop, right? Location and crop. Same goes for any other pocket of people under some kind of persecution and misdoing. It really will come down to things of like location and type of persecution. So, as an educated human, I wanted to express that when we start using things in common phrases, that's not the case. I'll even speak for myself on something that, and this is a little footnote to it. I do not, I listen to a lot of things here online, and so many people my age or a bit older, they talk about how they were treated as a child of like, you sit in the corner and you don't speak, or like going to Catholic schooling and the nuns and all this stuff. That is not my experience at all in this life. So when I hear them talk about this, I completely void what they're saying because I can't relate to it. That is the same in all groups of any form of persecution. We have to kind of get into more of the details so people can understand what it really is. Because if not, these common words can go right over people's heads, or it's just voided out. I was giving my example as in my life of today, when people start talking about how they weren't heard when they were a child, or they weren't allowed to express themselves and or express their gifts. I personally have no connection to that in any way, shape, or form. So this goes from all aspects of history, folks, because you were probably living during some form of huge aspect of history. It could be the French Revolution. It could be the Black Plague. It could be the time of slavery here in the States. It could be of, he starts talking about how the conquistadors took over, got rid of the Aztecs. Groups of people you had probably lived through somewhere. You either experienced it firsthand or you experienced it by witnessing it from a distance. So when we talk about things in today's world, I do suggest we give a bit more um explanation instead of just talking in common general terms, because that's not the case. It's just not the case. And we need to be able to resonate with things for it to waken up in us our memory. That's the whole point of why I'm saying all this right now, though, by the way. We have to waken up our memory. That's the whole point of waking up. It's the whole reason people are talking about this grand awakening. You're awakening from a sleep. The sleep is that you have forgotten who you are. The sleep is that you have forgotten that you have been here so many times that you don't have to live with karma, just do very differently. Do absolutely different than you have ever done before. But how do you know what that is unless you wake up and remember who you are? So as they're talking about more of the social aspects, um, I'll read it for a moment. 100 years ago, signs in office windows informed the unemployed that Irishmen and dogs need not apply. The Jew found himself as isolated in his segregated quarter in New York as he had been in Warsaw. The Negro was reduced to the bondage of the humanoids in Atlantis. This brave new race of free men, for all its unique birthright, still simmered in the melting pot. It was so he's talking about, and then he goes into the indigenous here. Even now, the true indigenous American, conceived in liberty, that's in quotations, has yet to emerge. This was in 1969. We are currently in the rise of the native. That is a part of many a prophecies. But will he, until all intolerance has vanished from the 50 states? This is all a question mark. He's posing a question because Edgar actually answered that. Edgar Cayce just asked, or was asked at some point, will the indigenous, and this was written and also in 1969, so he is talking at multiple parts. This writer is talking about the civil rights movement that was happening right as he's witnessing it. So he's talking about the indigenous, he's talking about the Negroes, and yes, he refers to them as Negroes in this book. He brought up the Irishmen. I don't know if you guys know this, but the Irishmen were just as worse as dogs in a lot of ways to people. I mean, they're the comic strips that were out there at that time, when the potato famine was coming in. Oh my gosh, nobody wanted to have the Irish around. Same with the Jews, right? Nobody really wanted the Jews. Um, this is why if that old movie Gangs of New York, that riot at the end is actually a historical event. And there was a lot going on during that riot when everybody was living in the Tenhams. So, the question is, will they ever emerge? Will they rise? The indigenous, the Negro, all these different groups that have been persecuted, will they ever rise and be able to live their authentic, true birthright? Will the intolerance ever vanish out of the 50 states? This was Edgar's response. Edgar, in his self imposed hypnosis, says no. This nation, so he's talking about America, this nation stuck its chin out as no nation had ever done when it wrote its constitution. As literal a covenant with God as any in the Bible. Other nations, not committed as this one, do not have to achieve or sustain such idealistic standards, even though half Europe and most of Asia still adhere to blah, 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 cycles and absolute manifestos that deny man's right to equality, brotherhood, and liberty. So he's saying that the United States of America, or the states, America, what have you, this little baby nation that I live in, um, when Casey was in a hypnosis getting an Akashic reading, it was asked, will these unfortunate beings that were here in America So that goes from, and he also did talk about the Muslims too somewhere in here. So it was pretty much across the board. And earlier he had talked about um, the brutality towards the Aztecs, and think about that group. And I'm going to talk about how this flips in a minute, okay? They ask Casey point blank, will they ever emerge? Meaning, will people be able to rise and just live lives they want to live, right? And he said no. And the reason is because our Constitution, the United States Constitution, which I adore, binded themselves so tightly to a covenant with God, how it was written, and it is written that way, we the people, binded them so tightly to a covenant with God, and then everything that is stated, the expectations are very high. The expectations are so high, they're damn near unattainable. Isn't that interesting to hear? Reincarnation iterates in every tenet, theme, and credo that a mock religion creates a mock people, that the root of all evil, the lethal poison men still feeds himself, is the sly, shameful hankering to persecute without being caught at it. Mm. So I'm going to bring this into today's world for a moment. I really am. So, Americans, we are a group. We are a group. And we are going through a whole lot of karma. A whole lot of karma. It is talking about how our Constitution was written. It is bind and a covenant that is so tight, and the good things in it are damn near unattainable. And think about 1969 and all of the other new stuff attached before 1969 that most people didn't even know about. So, and here's an example. And this is going to be one of the most unfortunate things that I probably have to state here. Take the civil rights movement, because the author was talking about it because it's what he was living in during the time of writing this book. That was a lot of different karma changing hands. So in a group, right? And in the proximity of a group, those who might have been the persecutors of a group, things start shifting and changing, right? As we start to reincarnate, right? So let's say you were a slave owner and you were a bad guy, very, very bad guy. Not all of them were, by the way. Very, very bad guy. Well, you reincarnate, and maybe it's not that the next life, but maybe the life down a bit, you are now a black man, living and feeling and experiencing the same persecution, torturous life that you had delivered out, that you did. We change hands. We change hands, right? We're changing all the time to experience what we just did ourselves, because time is fluid. Time and your timeline, it's all connecting. And if you noticed, it said, because I always talk in themes, it said every tenet, theme, and credo of a mocked religion creates a mocked people. That the root of all evil, the lethal poison man still feeds himself, is the sly, and shameful hankering to persecute without being caught by it. So, all of us at some point in time, we did the persecuting and then we experienced it. Then we did it, then we experienced it. Then we did it, then we experienced it. We get all sides of the theme of persecution. And we have done it over and over and over again because 3D is the land of judgment. So, and no matter what degree of or severity or light, um, maybe you weren't, you know, taken out by it, but maybe you were a woman who, yes, you just sat in a corner to look pretty many, many lives over. But then all of a sudden, you're also the man that did it, and vice versa. We keep doing that. We keep doing that. And here in the States, we're at a big time of it. So, but for us, it tends to be wrapped into legal constitution stuff. Isn't that crazy? Crazy. So here's a perfect example of what they're talking about of today's world. Perfect example. During the civil rights movement, of course, it was great. Blacks got the right to vote, right? This was not too long ago. This was very much not too long ago. Um, they got the right to vote. What most people don't know is right after that was written into our Constitution, there were articles then written in as to all of the things men could be arrested and put away for jail. And what people might not know, if especially if you don't live here in the States, if you have a felony, like if you went to jail and you got a felony charge, you can't vote. So there was a sure, we'll let everybody vote. We'll let the blacks vote. We'll let the black men vote. And then just shortly after that, we're going to put in all these new legislatures and laws that are going to lock up and break up the family unit of these black people. And we're going to lock up a bunch of men. Once they have a felony, they can never vote. So we really didn't give them the right in the first place. And we're going to make money at it at the same time because our prisons are just money making machines. So, I'm not trying to say this rudely. I'm not trying to say this condescendingly. I'm trying to say that for us, we the people, to really have change, it has nothing to do what's in our Constitution because our Constitution is flawed tremendously. And even if you go to the roots, as Edgar Cayce said from the Akashic record said that the roots of the American Constitution, the expectations there, the bar there, is not really sustainable. And we know that. And we've just been manipulating and using and using. So it has to change within. It has to change within. And I hate to say all this, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that people don't really know their history, especially here in the States. Especially here in the States. That it has nothing to do with our laws. Our laws, then they'll just make new laws. They'll just make new laws. Do you know how many laws there are now? And articles to those laws. So it's interesting to hear that Edgar said in his self-imposed hypnosis says no. I don't I think it can change. I think it can change. But it really does take each individual. Each individual. And it's so unfortunate that this chapter ends with The root of all evil, the lethal poison man still feeds himself poison, is the sly and shameful hankering. So, hankering is that little desire, right? To persecute without being caught at it. We all still are judging. We're all still judging, but it might be only happening behind closed doors. Might only be happening with that spouse. Then, when you're in conversations, we're all still persecuting. It has to happen within the individuals. And now it's not group against group and what have you. It takes the individual to say, I'm not going to be influenced. I'm not going to be influenced. I'm going to be completely open. And if I live my authentic life and I have compassion for myself and others, well, then others will witness and hopefully do the same because it has nothing to do with our laws. Well, beloveds, I have been with you close to an hour. And like I said, there are a few chapters that I accidentally missed that I will cover again. And we are closing in on the last chapter or so here, which is Reincarnation in the Future, which, if this was written in 1969, we are in the future. And it's mostly all of Edgar's words. So I want to hang on to that. I don't want to start that right now. I want to be with you and say, go back and listen to the videos about soulmates, soul groups, because we do come here in this beautiful web together, being born at different times to connect and connect and connect, right? Like, actually, my husband, he lived in the city or town, it was a town, in the town that was next to Dearborn, Illinois. Mm-hmm. So it's fancy that that came up tonight. And then I'm born an hour and a half drive somewhere else. But yet, that's how our webs can happen. He was actually born in Colorado, but his dad and mom had lived, or his dad lived in Illinois at times. So his dad went, you know what? I'm going to get a job in the Chicagoland area. So they move to Chicagoland. So even if you relocate later in life, it's still to connect with certain members of that group. So I'm going to leave it with this, and bear with me. I talked about it, I think, maybe a year ago. Since the pandemic, there has been a lot of movement, especially here in the States. A lot of people relocating, and not just like a town over. I mean, people have relocated across country in many places, all over the place. This area where I live in is becoming very saturated compared to what it used to be. There are reasons why. There are reasons why. And I will speak for like this area in particular. This area is where the Trail of Tears were happening. This area is rich in history, rich in big battles that determined aspects of the Civil War. There's a lot that went on in this area. And there's many people's souls. Like your soul wants to represent itself in a way. It wants to say, you know what? I've cleared up so much wreckage. I've traced my steps in so many ways, but I got some stuff that I still need to handle. So even if I live out in Arizona, or I live out in Seattle, or if I live in New York, right? I'm gonna move to the Chattanooga area, right? Of Tennessee, Georgia. I'm gonna move to here because your soul is saying, "Hey, you lived there for many a times, and all through that, you have things that you need to heal and do differently. Do very differently." All when people are doing this, when people are relocating to new places, that is not because you're breaking away from your soul group, this and that. It's because past soul groups are located there. And you went, "You know what? I think I'm good with this group. I think I did really good. I think I need to go talk to those other people that I did a few rounds with, and we need to sort some stuff out." Right? For when people do that and they actually heal and they change and they make different decisions, not based on the influences, right? We make very different decisions based on compassion for self and others. I am telling you, folks, it heals the earth. It heals the earth because, like, the earth here in this area has gone through a lot. It has gone through so much bloodshed in this area. Up and down the East Coast, but a lot here, right? Same with Chicagoland, where I'm from. That area, there is something in the water. There's a lot in the water, folks. So, when we start doing things like that, it heals the earth, it heals us, and it heals the past. But it's on an individual level. It's all individual, but we're all mirrors of one another and we're all connected. Because my web of group is connected to another web of group, then another group, then another group. We're all connected. And this beautiful positive energy just flows through all of the chains that connect us. All these cords that people want to cut is also how the energy flows. So, wherever you're at, whatever group you have been born into, whatever group you have chosen to relocate to, whatever group you have chosen to marry into, it is an opportunity to practice compassion. Every single time, it's an opportunity to practice compassion and to trust that when you choose yourself, and you're practicing compassion for self and others, when you're choosing yourself, trust that you are laying down judgment, because 3D is the land of judgment. It is the land of persecution, even if you don't get caught. That is what third dimensional living consciousness is. But we can rise above and emerge. We can. So, until we meet again, folks, I do believe we're going to be talking about this sort of thing much more. A little bit of different history all over the place for tonight, especially here in the States. I want to thank Seeker for coming in, Earth Elements, Jackie, Chloe. Good to see all of you. Once again, July 4th, I will be releasing a tarot reading for all of the zodiac signs that morning at 11 a.m. It will not be live, it'll be pre recorded. And you will see me and Lucky Stone 888 here Saturday night, also pre recorded, because I have a lot of contractors in the next few days coming into the house. Um, I will be here Saturday night at 8 p.m. And catch me on the flip side, folks. Whenever you see me pop through, make sure that you hit that bell to be notified and give this a thumbs up. I'll catch you later, stars. Bye, guys.